it's Nova from the Rose System. We are so excited to be back. We are so excited to be filming for you all again. This has been a long time coming, but we are now in a place where we can get back into filming regularly, get back into making videos for you. So, with this amazing turn of the events, we have also reached a YouTube milestone. We have reached 1,000 subscribers, and we thank each and every one of you for subscribing. It is incredibly humbling to know that our content is reaching people and is having an effect on people. And we pray and we hope that that our content is helping you to understand and know God just a little bit better. For our 1,000 subscribers video, we put out a poll on YouTube and Instagram asking if you wanted a live stream Q&A, a series of shorts, or if you wanted a long form video. And the long form video won. We were worried about when we would be able to film this video, just because our life has been through a lot of upheavals recently, but we now have a secure and safe filming space where we can record our videos and not be worried about our recording impacting others. So let's get into the questions that you have asked us. Our first question is, do you ever struggle with your faith because of DID? There are definitely aspects of our faith that we do struggle with because of our DID, but there are other aspects of our faith that our DID enhances. So DID is a trauma-based disorder. It is a form of extreme PTSD due to severe repeated childhood trauma. And for us, most of our trauma occurred in Christian settings. Whether that be at church or at youth group or at the kids club programs or Sunday school or any range of activities, a lot of our trauma stems from programs run by churches or by people we knew through the church. Not every one of our trauma is directly linked to church and the Christian community, but a lot of it is. And so a huge part of our faith that we struggle with is we are supposed to be in communion with God's people. We are supposed to help the Christian community and have the Christian community help us. And we really struggle with that because we do have so many issues with the way churches deal with things like abuse and the way the church deals with ostracized communities and the apparent indifference to the people that God calls us to love. And when it's not indifference, it's right out hatred. And we really struggle with that. We struggle with a lot of the theology that many churches teach, but we have come to a place where we have been able to say, I don't agree with this particular theology, or I don't agree with that particular interpretation of this passage. But that doesn't make my faith any less real and valid, and it doesn't make the faith of those who do believe that any less real and valid. There are some things that Christians do that I go, how can you call yourself a Christian and do that? So a lot of my issues with the faith has to do with the way I see Christians failing to represent God. And I know that I fail to represent God. This is not a everyone else issue. This is also an internal issue. As for direct relationship with God, we do go through periods of anger with God, going, how could you allow something like this to happen to us? And not only did it happen once, it happened so many times. And that is so hard to reconcile sometimes. But at the same time, God has given us a deep sense of peace and a deep sense of hope that most people who've gone through what we've gone through cannot imagine. And that is what God has provided us to help us know Him and to help us know His love for us. We know that with God, He will find a way to reach each person in the way that they need Him to. And so the way He reaches out to us is through the deep-seated peace and hope that He's provided us. And this looks different for each Christian. Each Christian has a different experience with their faith and with God. Can you tell me more about your journey with DID, in particular your diagnosis? So I will put a disclaimer here. My ability to remember dates is incredibly bad. I know that I started therapy at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, but I cannot give you dates for diagnoses or dates for significant events, but I can tell you the order that things happened in. If you want more specific dates, we recommend checking out our diagnosis video. That was made much closer to when we did actually get diagnosed, and so we have recorded the specific dates there. So I grew up believing that I was healthy, I was stable, I was neurotypical, I was, the amazing, go-getter who just was able to get through life. And, I never went through anything particularly bad. I wasn't traumatized. I hadn't been through trauma. Yeah, there was, these two particular events, but they weren't PTSD causing events. They were just things that happened. And I did incredibly well in high school. I immediately got into university. I was, thriving and flourishing and pretty much just succeeding in life. And then I went to university and I moved out of home. And suddenly life started to unravel. I started having anxiety symptoms, like overt anxiety symptoms. I started having flashbacks and seizures and all of these horrible body memories that I had no way of categorizing or understanding. And I refused to believe that my health was falling apart. I did my best to convince myself that this was just a blip, that I was okay, this was just a minor situation. I didn't have mental health, didn't have anything. Anyway, I ended up in the hospital due to a 9-hour seizure. And I started on medication. I started on an antidepressant. And I got in with a therapist who has been seeing me for the last for the last 6 years or so. And through therapy I learned I had PTSD. In the screening questions, there were questions that asked about dissociation and different dissociation types, like identity fluctuation, and with dissociative fugue, which is when you black out and you appear in a new location when you come back to depersonalization, derealization. And I had no understanding of what any of these terms were. And so I googled dissociation, and that's when I came across DID and OSDD for the first time. And I did research into it, and I was like, why does this feel like me? This can't be me. I don't have this condition, you know. I went through one traumatic event when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and that's it. That's all it is. But we did conclude that I did have dissociation. It just definitely wasn't DID or OSDD. And I lived with that for quite a while. But I kept doing research into DID because I did find it fascinating. I did find it fascinating, but I couldn't work out why I related it to it so much. I now know why, but at the time couldn't work out why. And then in therapy, we were starting to try, and we did a couple of sessions of EMDR. And this resulted in a really steep increase in symptoms, particularly in dissociation. And it broke down the first of the amnesia walls that had kept me completely unaware. And I met little A, little M, and Mist. But initially I didn't know that. I just thought we called them parts of me. So they were me, they were just different representations of me. There was me, there was the happy child and the sad child and the mean one which was Mist. And we renamed Mist to the Protector, because that's what Mist was doing. And in time, I learnt their names. With little M, I kept hearing her say, I'm me, I'm me, I'm me. And me is the first sound in her name. She was trying to tell me her name. But the amnesia barrier was still there and sound was not getting through. We continued with therapy and my communication with those 3 alters got better. And I went, they have names, they have their own personalities. When there is this experience I had where one of them will take over and I'm watching everything that's happening, but I'm not in control. And that's when I went to my therapist and I said, hey, these are the things I'm experiencing. What is the disorder that I have? Because we have said it can't be DID. I don't have enough amnesia for it to be DID. And so she went away and she did research and she came back with OSDD, specifically OSDD1. And I went, great. I am in an OSDD system, known as an OSDD1B system, and that's when we started making YouTube videos. And you'll see in a lot of our earlier videos, we refer to ourselves as an OSDD system. This is why. I continued therapy and I was like, okay, I am a system of 4. We don't have amnesia. We just exist. And the reason why there's only 4 of us and the reason why we don't have amnesia is because the trauma happened relatively late in the DID developmental window, and there was only one trauma, and yes, it was a really significant trauma, and that combined with being a sick baby, those are the things that has resulted in this. Like, there's nothing more. That's it. There is just that one thing that resulted in this small OSDD system, and that's it. And therapy continued, and I met more alters, and more alters were coming out of dormancy, and more alters were interacting with me, and each time I had processed that there was another trauma. As soon as I had processed that, another alter would come out and tell me their story. And all of this was whilst I was still living in a traumatic environment. Yes, it was better, but it was still traumatic. And it got to the point where I went, I need a formal diagnosis. And so I went to my therapist and I said, okay, I'd like to do the proper screening. I'd like to do the official paperwork. I'd like to do everything. I need to know what I have. Because my perception on life just keeps changing and keeps growing, and I need to know what this is. And so we did the paperwork. We screened for personality disorders. We screened for schizoaffective disorders. We screened for bipolar and BPD, and we screened for dissociative disorders. We screened for PTSD. We didn't screen for CPTSD because the screening process we were using was under the DSM-5, which at that point in time didn't have CPTSD as a diagnosis. My apologies. And we continued, and we were screened for so many things. And we came back, and my therapist handed me the paper, and it had anxiety, depression, PTSD, and DID on it. And I said I thought I didn't qualify for DID because I don't have the blackout amnesia that all of these DID systems are describing. And she said, no, you don't have those blackout symptoms, but you do have amnesia surrounding your trauma. And you do have amnesia surrounding things that most people would remember. You don't remember the first 7 years of your life. Your memories start when you were 7. Most people's earliest memories when they're about 2 or 3. Yours don't start until you're 7. This is why you have met the criteria for DID over OSDD. And it was simultaneously a weight lifting off and a moment of intense grief. And I'm still in therapy. I'm still learning about my system and all this kind of stuff. Last year, I came to terms with the fact, well, I haven't come to terms with it just yet, but I am starting to accept the fact that I'm probably a polyfragmented DID system, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that my trauma is so much deeper than the events that I know about. And that's kind of the diagnosis story up to this point. How well do your alters communicate, and how did you go about increasing that? This is a good question. A lot of therapy has been huge in it, allowing myself to sit with the uncomfortable intrusions, writing down, just letting everything run out was a way that we started that. And internal communication got better. Internal communication got better with the journaling that we were doing and everything. And then when some particular alters came out of dormancy, middle L being one of them, middle L being a key person in this, middle L had really good internal communication. She was able to get messages back and forth, and so she took on a role of being a runner. And when Kel came out of dormancy and when Wraith came out of dormancy, they helped middle L, so middle L has now been able to retire from that role. We've got Summer now. Summer split in the last couple of years. I'm not sure exactly when, but Summer split recently. And she has really good internal communication as well as external communication. And that helped a lot with the trauma season that has just ended. We, amongst the splits that were happening because of the traumatic situation that we were going through, Seb and Summer and Mist and Wraith and Kel, and with input from middle L and input from little m, and a little bit of input from one and his team, we were able to split through a tactical split. And the only reason we could do this was because we were going through trauma, and I never was unaware of this. I didn't know this was happening. This was happening in the background. But what they did is they made a tactical split, and they were able to form 3 alters who are able to communicate with each other regardless of where they are in the inner world, and they are able to run messages between sections of the inner world. I cannot communicate with them myself, so the communication does break down when it comes to me. They have to tell someone that they can communicate with each other, and if they're close enough to say Seb or Summer or Mist or Wraith, they can talk with them. They can talk with Middle Earl, they can talk with most people, but they have to be close with them to talk. But for information to get passed to me, one of those alters has to tell an alter who can speak to me, and then I get a vague impression of what they're saying. It comes through this blurring filter that takes a while to decipher and understand what is coming through. Internally, alters speak through emotions and images and words. But talking with me, it is primarily flashes of images and word sentences. Our communication did develop naturally, but also with quite a considerable effort. A lot of our therapy sessions during that time was spent with alters coming to me and going, a lot of that time was spent in therapy with me saying, hey, something is happening in this area, and my therapist giving guiding questions, scaffolding questions, and everything to try and help get as many sides of the thing that was trying to be communicated so that I could understand it. And so therapy was a massive help in developing our communication as a system. Hey, it's Editing Nova here, just jumping on really quickly to let you know that this is part 1 of goodness knows how many videos for our 1,000 subscribers Q&A. We want to thank you for watching. Much love, and we will see you in the next Q&A video. Bye.